On the night before the wedding, James Grant's first love returned. She showed up at the party, holding a little boy and claiming he was their child, and that the situation was urgent. The wedding I had waited 7 years for was interrupted by a single statement. In his social circle, he was with his first love, and there was a sleeping child beside them, revealing a sense of responsibility I had never seen from him before. Without hesitation, I left him and boarded a cruise ship for a round-the-world journey. Before boarding the ship, he made a phone call. "I'm sorry, Anna, I didn't know you were pregnant." I gently stroked my belly and smiled as I asked, "What did you say?" However, due to poor signal at the port, the call got disconnected. On the night before the wedding, James Grant invited a group of friends to have a bachelor party in the wedding suite. Halfway through the party, a young woman dressed like a cleaner walked in, holding a little boy's hand. She appeared very nervous and quickly said, "I'm sorry, this is my child. He is sick, and I can only keep him by my side. Please don't kick me out. Give me some money, and I am willing to do anything." When she looked up, everyone was surprised and stopped what they were doing. "Emily Reed," someone whispered mockingly, accusing her of being the rich girl who abandoned James to study in Australia for $5 million. Being unmarried and pregnant, she was seen as lacking propriety. James Grant's face was pale, and the people around her were mocking her coldly. I could no longer hold back and stepped forward to help her. "If you need assistance, I can help you find a job." But James Grant suddenly shoved my hand away and replied coolly, "Don't pretend to be kind here." I was taken aback. He had pursued me for 7 years and had never spoken harshly to me, but today was an exception. The little boy next to us tore open the wedding candies that were to be distributed tomorrow, scattering them all over the ground. He seemed oblivious to it, fixated on Emily Reed, raising his phone. Wasn't he looking for money? "I'm recording right here. If you take off all your clothes, I'll give you $5 million. That's really too much." I've never seen anyone as rude as James Grant. But Emily Reed just bit her lip and immediately lifted her top. Everyone watched in silence until she revealed her underwear. James Grant felt regret as he tossed aside his phone, wrapped his long coat around her, and held her close. "Such an unreasonable demand. Do you really think I would agree to that?" he said through gritted teeth. "Emily Reed, how could you do this?" She looked at him, suddenly breaking down in tears, feeling wronged. "Yes, I am exactly like this." She pointed to the little boy in the corner who was tearing the guest list into shreds and said, "But he is our child. James was sick, and the doctor said his condition was very serious. He wouldn't live to see his 10th birthday. James Grant was taken aback upon hearing this. I quickly stepped forward, trying to stay calm, and told him I would take care of the child's expenses. "Once you take the money, don't go near him again. Tomorrow, James Grant and I are getting married, and at this moment, I don't want any interference. James Grant knows that I've waited 7 long years for this wedding." I thought he would stand by my side, but unexpectedly, he suddenly pushed me away and said, "This is between me and her, Anna Foster, you shouldn't get involved. The wedding can be postponed." He adjusted Emily Reed's dress, cradled the child in one arm, and, with her in the other, walked out of the villa without looking back. James Grant's friends looked at me with a mix of pity, sarcasm, and a hint of schadenfreude. Meanwhile, I was crouched on the ground, picking up the pieces of the chaos. The candy box I had designed with my own hands had been damaged by that little kid, and I felt a deep sense of sadness that made tears stream down my face. Just the night before, James Grant had held me in his arms, gently patting my back and kissing my forehead. He had pursued me for 7 years, and I finally opened my heart to him, sharing my most vulnerable side. He said that I had a tough time in the past, and now he would give me the best. He bought me the most expensive wedding dress and booked the hotel penthouse for 6 figures a day. I had planned to tell him about my pregnancy tomorrow as a surprise. But unexpectedly, Emily Reed and that child appeared out of nowhere. I heard that Emily Reed was James Grant's first love. When their relationship was at its best, she chose to terminate her pregnancy for $5 million and didn't hesitate to break up with him. Since then, James Grant's resentment towards her deepened. Yet today, I truly saw the way he looked at her, filled with passion and emotion. Clearly, he still loved her. Back at my house, I kept making phone calls until the evening. Notify the wedding planning company and all the guests that the wedding has been cancelled. The last call I made was to my brother, John Foster. He was very angry and accused me of being incompetent, unable to hold on to a man. He hopes that I can help him manage the company's affairs. In my heart, I thought, this is not just your company, it's the Foster family's business, and I deserve a share in it as well. But I didn't say anything on the surface, which only made him angrier. It was impossible to communicate. I really don't understand how you can have such a sister. Forget it, no more talking. Just hurry and transfer me $500,000. I want to gather some money to buy a Ferrari. Suddenly, a hand reached out from behind and gently took my phone away. She has no money, and even if she did, she wouldn't give it to you. James Grant's tone was very harsh. As for when and how Anna Foster and I will get married, that's not something you need to concern yourself with. Moreover, the Foster family's company is now my property. I can give it to whomever I choose. After he hung up the phone, I turned around and allowed him to gently lift my chin and kiss me. He said gently, "Little treasure, give me a few days, and I'll handle her affairs and we can restart the wedding right away. You've always been my wife, and you always will be." He held me close, his hand lightly sliding to my lower abdomen. "Shall we have a child? A healthy one, with your eyes in my nose." I understood that this was the pinnacle of James Grant's patience. If it were in the past, I would have already immersed myself in his embrace, as gentle as spring water. However, tonight, for some reason, the closer he got, the more awake I became and the more pain I felt. I gently pushed him away and said coldly, "Do you feel proud, James Grant, watching two women compete for your affection, suffering because of you?" His smile vanished in an instant. He took out a checkbook from the drawer, tore off a check, and handed it to me. "Please fill in the numbers yourself. I've been a bit busy recently, so go ahead and buy whatever you want." I couldn't help but sarcastically ask, "What are you busy with? Taking care of your first love and her child? Why bother spending money to make me uncomfortable? Do you think I haven't seen money before?" In the photo, James Grant is holding Emily Reed's hand, looking at the child in the hospital bed with deep concern, truly resembling a good father. I tore the check in half and watched as James Grant's expression turned grim. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by a phone call. On the other end of the line, Emily Reed was crying heartbrokenly, "James, Charlie's heart rate is unstable again. The doctors are trying to save him, and I'm so scared. Can you come and be with me?" I covered my flushing face and saw James Grant suppressing his emotions as he replied, "I have someone here with me. If you need help, you can reach out to them. Tonight, I am going to be with my wife." I raised my voice at the phone and asked, "Has something happened to the child? Which hospital?" I immediately ordered someone to take James Grant there. James Grant looked at me, initially surprised, then turned very angry. "Anna Foster, I didn't expect you to be so disrespectful. You want me to leave? Fine, but you better think it through." After saying that, he let go of me and turned to the woman on the phone, his tone suddenly softening. "Emily, just wait for me, I'll be there soon." He slammed the door loudly as he left. I lay in the darkness, feeling the small life inside my belly. I remembered 3 months ago when I was abducted by John Foster's creditor, who planned to use me to pressure my brother into repaying millions in gambling debts. John Foster had said just one sentence, "If you want to kill her, go ahead. Her life is worth 30 million, after all." It was at that moment, with a knife held to my throat, that James Grant burst in with his men to rescue me. He held me tightly in his arms and declared firmly, "This is my wife. Anyone who dares to harm her will have to answer to me." No one dared to provoke the Grant family. One moment they seemed formidable, and the next they scattered in fear. That night, James Grant trembled as he proposed to me. I responded with my body, but when he opened the box, I stopped his hand. I told him it was okay, to give it to me, all right? I don't give my heart easily, but once I fall in love with someone, I will hold nothing back. Perhaps James Grant had been so good to me in the past that I forgot the possibility of being truly wronged. The next day, I heard that James Grant had accompanied a stranger and her child to the hospital late at night. This wasn't good news. Early in the morning, I received a call from James's mother. She asked me to bring a gift to the hospital to see Emily Reed. I wasn't very keen on getting involved in your affairs, but for the sake of James Grant's reputation, you both should act like a harmonious couple. I endured the discomfort of early pregnancy and hurried to the hospital with various things in hand. In the ward, James Grant was wrapped in a blanket, sleeping on the adjacent fold-out bed. In his arms lay Emily Reed, also peacefully asleep. On the bed next to them, a child was receiving in 4 drip while playing with some toys. It really looked like a family. I placed the supplements on the bedside table, waking Emily Reed, who looked at me with the eyes of a startled doe. I'm sorry, Sister Anna, I didn't mean to. I really couldn't help myself. I struck her lightly without thinking. James Grant had woken up early but didn't manage to stop me in time. He tenderly caressed her face, and his gaze toward me was filled with indifference. I thought to myself, who would dare to touch Emily? I scoffed, who said I can't have an opinion about a mistress? Emily Reed was crying as she said, Sister Anna, things aren't as you think. James Grant, wearing a serious expression, said, Anna Foster, I won't be happy if you keep this up. A woman I don't like means nothing to me. I remember when he first started pursuing me. His friends said that James only came after me out of anger. The truth of it, I would only know if that woman ever returned one day. Back then, I stubbornly refused to believe it. Now, it seems I was wrong. The attending doctor came in for his rounds, and James Grant held Emily Reed as they followed the doctor outside to learn more about the condition. I was filled with heartache when, unexpectedly, the quiet little boy in the hospital bed spoke up, calling me a bad aunt. I asked him, what did you say? He lifted his small face to look at me, his eyes full of clear jealousy. Mommy said you're pregnant, and if the baby is born, Daddy will no longer want me. I hate that aunt. I wish my dad and mom would be together forever. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. Looking down, I saw a knife plunged into my stomach, blood gushing out. The little boy pulled out the knife and slashed his arm, then began to cry loudly, Mom, that aunt is bullying me. Emily Reed quickly ran into the house, followed closely by the equally anxious James Grant. He looked at the blood on the ground and the small knife that had fallen beside it, and his expression turned grim. He rushed over, tightly gripping my throat, and said angrily, Anna Foster, that knife was meant for your protection. It wasn't supposed to be used to harm my son. I struggled to breathe and couldn't find my voice to argue back. Indeed, that was the knife James Grant had specifically sent to me from Switzerland after the kidnapping incident. I had always kept it in my bag, which I placed on the nightstand. I never expected the child to take it out while I wasn't paying attention. The pain in my neck and lower abdomen left me feeling weak, and as soon as James Grant let go, I fell to the ground like a rag doll. I mumbled softly, I didn't do it, James Grant, do you believe me? But no one heard me. The child collapsed, and the medical equipment started beeping in alarm. Emily Reed cried out, my child. Please don't die. Don't leave me. A group of doctors and nurses quickly rushed over, pushing the small bed toward the emergency room. It wasn't until the last nurse noticed me that she asked, how did you get hurt too? She supported me alone to get bandaged, but the bleeding increased, and I felt very weak. I told her I was pregnant, and the nurse's expression changed immediately. She quickly called someone to take me into the operating room. I'm not sure how long it was before I heard someone shouting, where is the family? The patient needs surgery. Who will sign the consent form? Then another doctor in a white coat came in front of me, patted my face, and asked if I was still conscious. The pregnancy has reached a critical point, and the baby might not survive. Please be prepared, as we are about to begin the surgery. I nodded, but in my heart, I was murmuring, where is James Grant? This is his child, please help me find him. Everything in front of me became blurry, and tears fell unconsciously. The nurse said gently, we don't know the James Grant you mentioned, and there's no one else outside. The girl, you must take responsibility for your own body. So that's how it is. In the end, I was all alone. I felt lonely and scared, and could only close my eyes, sinking into darkness. When I woke up again, I saw a little nurse in uniform changing my for. She saw that I had woken up and gently said to me that the surgery had gone smoothly and that my body hadn't been seriously harmed. It's okay, you're still young, and you have the chance to get rid of the jerk and start anew. I asked her how the little boy, Charlie, in the room next door was doing. The nurse replied that the child already had immune issues and that our hospital couldn't treat him. After he was stabilized that day, his family transferred him to another hospital. No wonder I was all alone. Checking my phone, I noticed that John Foster had called me 33 times without an answer. I called him back and heard a man drunkenly cursing. Everyone knows that James has already gone bankrupt and still has to pay for that little boy's medical bills. Isn't he your husband? I asked. The man said, if this marriage doesn't go through, what was the point of your father wanting you, this illegitimate child, in the first place? I patiently waited for him to finish his tirade, then responded, well, please inform James Grant that since this marriage isn't happening now, it won't need to happen in the future either. If you think I have no value, then from now on, I will cut off all ties with you and the entire Foster family. Just consider me as if I no longer exist. I decisively hung up the phone. Then I checked the balance of the only savings card in my name and booked a cruise around the world for myself. This time, I completely let go of my worries. A month later, I boarded the cruise with a new SIM card and a companion. The companion's name was Nick Woods. He was 185 centimeters tall, had 8-pack abs, and was a graduate student in psychology. I offered him extra accommodation and a monthly salary of $50,000 so he could wholeheartedly spend time with me. In fact, no one knew that over the past few years, living frugally beside the Foster family and James Grant, I had saved up $10 million. This $10 million would allow me to quietly slip away from everyone's sight. However, just before boarding the ship, my phone suddenly rang. When I answered, a familiar male voice came through. I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't know you were pregnant. Where are you? I'm sending someone to pick you up now. I gazed at the tranquil and vast sea in the distance. Before Nick would set sail, he bought me a warm cup of milk tea and handed it to me. Everything was so perfect, undisturbed. I smiled and pulled my phone away, asking, what did you just say? The signal at the port was poor, so I hung up the phone. Once on the boat, Nick Woods asked me who had called earlier. I smiled casually and replied, it was just a spam call, there's no need to pay attention to it. After my miscarriage, I came to understand a lot of things. I am the illegitimate daughter of the Foster family and have been taught since childhood to serve John Foster, the legitimate son. The year my father passed away, Foster Corporation was acquired by James Grant due to mismanagement. On his deathbed, my father entrusted me with the task of marrying James Grant and insisted that I find a way to get the company back for my younger brother. I tried my best to be sensible and to meet everyone's expectations, not realizing how much I had sacrificed for John Foster. In the end, all I received was their endless exploitation. I thought that marrying James Grant would bring me love, but the emergence of Emily Reed shattered my 7-year dream. No one compares to Nick Woods when it comes to being thoughtful towards me. You know, it's important to live happily for oneself. In the cabin, I lay on his lap, allowing him to feed me the sliced mangoes. Seeing that I was drowsy, he took a blanket and carefully tucked me in. Does it still hurt? They'll go get you some painkillers and brown sugar ginger tea. The biggest issue left by the miscarriage is the menstrual cramps. He let me drink water and take medicine, and he even coaxed me to sleep, making me feel like a little girl being cared for. A month later, the ship sailed into international waters and was suddenly surrounded by a fleet of private boats. At first, everyone thought it was pirates, so I went up on deck to see what was happening. As I walked to the bow of the ship, I spotted the tall and stern figure of James Grant. He boarded the cruise ship and exchanged a few polite words in a foreign language with the captain before handing over a check. Then, he approached me. Anna, I knew you would be here. He looked quite tired, but there was an unexpected tenderness in his gaze as he looked at me. He reached out his hand, and I realized I was wrong. Let's go home. Before I could respond, Nick Woods next to me exploded in anger. Who are you? What right do you have to stop the boat and take her away? James Grant showed a disdainful expression, sneering coldly, and who are you? You're nothing more than someone trying to provoke me. Compared to me, you're still far behind. After saying that, he attempted to grab my hand, but was quickly swatted away by Nick Woods, who shouted, "Don't touch her." I frowned at the side, while James Grant raised his voice and asked Nick Woods, "What is your relationship with her?" Nick Woods glanced at me and gritted his teeth, saying, "I'm her boyfriend." With that, he swung a punch at James Grant. This reminds me of a time when I got drunk and shared my background with Nick Woods, which is why he recognized James Grant and wanted to help me. The two men started fighting on the deck, but instead of feeling satisfied, I couldn't hold back any longer and yelled, "Stop fighting." I pulled the bloodied Nick Woods behind me and looked directly at the man in front of me, saying, "James Grant, you need to leave." I wasn't suggesting he go back, I wanted him to truly leave, and my tone made that very clear. Indeed, his face instantly turned pale, and he quickly explained, "It's all my fault. I was busy with Charlie's situation and didn't realize you were pregnant too. Please, sweetheart, don't be angry, okay? The child can still be here. I have already sent Emily Reed away. Please give me another chance. He gritted his teeth, and I know you hate Charlie. If you come back with me, I will send that child away too. After saying that, I couldn't help but slap him. He clearly still hasn't figured out who hurt whom in the hospital. We never had a certificate, so it doesn't matter now. James Grant, I don't love you anymore, and it doesn't matter how you explain it. My voice trembled involuntarily, my nails digging deep into my flesh, causing a faint pain. Seeing his dejected expression still made me feel a bit sad inside. However, no matter how sad I am, I know that we cannot go back to the past. James Grant and I were at a stalemate for a long time, and it ultimately ended with his departure. As he was leaving, he said to me, "I'll come to get you when you're done playing." This statement made me feel very uncomfortable. The Grant family has a strong background, and even if I change my phone number, James Grant will still be able to find me. If he wants to get involved, I have no way to resist. After the crowd dispersed, I saw Nick Woods at the back, his face covered in blood. I took care of his wounds and then transferred him 200,000 yuan. This money is a compensation for 3 months of your salary and the cost of your plane ticket. Once you leave the ship and return to your country, our deal will be over. Nick Woods looked at me in disbelief and asked me why. Because you overstepped your boundaries. I sighed. His unsolicited defense for me added to my sense of responsibility. The role of being a companion had become unclear, so it had to end here. A woman doesn't necessarily need to rely on a stable partner. As long as she has money, she can attract the right person. At the next stop, Nick Woods got off the boat with a lackluster demeanor. I felt a wave of exhaustion as well, and over the next 6 months, I didn't seek any new companions. Traveling alone can sometimes have its own charm. By the time I returned to my country, it was fall. I took a deep breath as I stepped off the boat, and outside the port was a row of black sedans. John Foster approached with a smile and said, "Sister, you're back." I was taken aback by his sudden show of respect. However, upon seeing the fierce gaze of the Grant family bodyguard directed at John Foster behind me, I immediately understood everything. It seemed that James Grant had privately dealt with John Foster while I was away, all in an effort to please me, ensuring that he would no longer dare to be rude to me. I did not resist and allowed them to take me to the villa that had originally been prepared as our wedding house. When I was brought into the study, James Grant was sitting behind the desk, and upon seeing me enter, he pushed a contract towards me. His expression was gentle as he said to me, "Xiaobao, I've got the company you've always wanted back for you." It was a share transfer contract, indicating that the shares of Foster Corporation, which had been previously acquired, were completely returned to me. He got up and tried to hug me from behind, asking, "Xiaobao, did you have a good time outside?" I decided to put our wedding plans back on track, using the decorations we had chosen together before. "If you're willing, we can hold it tomorrow." I took a step back to avoid his embrace and didn't take the contract. I shook my head with a smile. I no longer needed the wedding or the company. In the past, I saw myself as the daughter of the Foster family and the sister of John Foster, which is why I was so invested in my father's business. But now, I am just Anna Foster, and I have no ties to anyone. I have left behind a family that doesn't care about me, so I have no obligation to meet their expectations. As for you, I glanced at James Grant, who looked stunned, and I felt even less inclined to pay him any mind. I tried to walk past him and leave, but he called out to me. "One more thing," he said, "Emily Reed is your half-sister. She wants to meet you." After leaving the villa, I called a car and arrived at the cafe where Emily Reed had arranged to meet me. She sat across from me, and after not seeing her for over half a year, she seemed to have matured quite a bit. "Did James tell you everything?" This was the last wish I entrusted to him before I left. I suppressed the complex emotions in my heart and calmly asked, "Is there something you want to get from me by specifically telling me this?" A lot happened while I was away. First, the creditors from the online loans and Emily Reed's exes began to show up, and they were discovered by James Grant. During the years she was away from him, she took $5 million to Australia, but she didn't actually go to school. Instead, she frequently visited casinos and mingled with many wealthy young men. Before long, the $5 million ran out, and she accumulated a significant amount of debt. Emily Reed's life abroad was quite tough, so she had to return home to work and repay her debts. Until one night, she sought out James Grant, asking for his help regarding their child. Upon learning the truth, James Grant was furious. He kept the child and ended up kicking Emily Reed out of the house. As a final gesture of goodwill, I asked James to tell you about this matter. Emily Reed smiled wryly as she handed me the genetic testing report. I just wanted to ask you one thing. Could you please talk to James and let me go back to see Charlie, okay? After reading the report, the results were already very clear, so I got up and left. I didn't agree. Just now, at the villa, I told James Grant that I would be changing jobs and moving. From now on, I have no relationship with you or James Grant. If either of you bothers me again, I will call the police. Even if Emily Reed is my sister, what difference does that make? I don't believe that I should bear such a heavy responsibility just because of this blood connection. To my surprise, she suddenly stood up and threw her arms around my thigh. With tears streaming down her face, she pleaded, I beg you, my ex-lovers have been causing me trouble lately, and as soon as I leave the cafe, they're on my case. I really don't love James anymore. I just want to ask him to protect me one more time, to give me another chance. I felt both scared and angry, and I raised my leg, intending to push her away. What are you doing? Don't come near me. I pushed Emily Reed away, but when she lunged at me again, there was a newfound determination and anger in her eyes. Why is that? We were born of the same mother. You ended up as a privileged lady just because you chose the wrong man, while I became the despised mistress. I couldn't dodge in time and felt a sharp pain in my leg. When I came to my senses, I realized a small knife was embedded in my leg and blood was gushing out. The pain caused me to fall to the ground, and the bodyguards outside immediately rushed into the cafe to protect me. Shortly after, I was taken to the hospital for treatment. Before long, James Grant arrived in the examination room. He asked with concern, Little Bao, are you all right? Then he squatted down to carefully examine my wound. The old Anna Foster would have been touched by such tenderness, but now all I felt was resistance and discomfort. James Grant, I just want to leave you and the Foster family behind and live a normal, stable life. I struggled to suppress my emotions and said word by word, please, stop entangling me, and don't make things difficult for me, okay? He lowered his head and remained silent for a moment before smiling gently. Xiao Bao, I admit that at first, I pursued you out of spite towards Emily Reed. But it was only after you left that I realized I truly cannot go on without you. I could see a look of determination in his eyes. Can we start over? James Grant, wake up. I slapped him hard across the face. You still don't know what happened that day in the hospital, who hurt whom. Because of this, it's impossible for us to start over. I forced a bitter smile as I saw confusion and frustration appear in his eyes for the first time. I pulled my leg away from his grip and limped out. On the way, I remembered the day of the miscarriage. The operating room was filled with the sickening smell of blood and antiseptic. I lay alone on the hospital bed, tears streaming down my face as I called out James Grant's name. Blood clots were being expelled from my body, and I felt incredibly cold and very frightened. But at that moment, James Grant was with his child, spending time with the woman he once loved, forgetting about me. That day, he didn't come, and there was no need for him to come after that. After my leg healed, I specially went to the detention center to see Emily Reed. By then, she had already been severely injured by people arranged by James Grant while in custody. When she saw me, she was only able to gasp for breath, unable to say a complete sentence. I asked her, are you envious of me? She glared at me with hatred. I honestly wish I could trade lives with you. I've seen your social media posts and photos of you with your mom. Back then, I didn't even know that she was my mom too. Your relationship seems really good. She was taken aback. Since I can remember, I have been raised by a nanny in the Foster family. Throughout my life, I have been the rejected illegitimate daughter, often unable to show my face in public. I rolled up my sleeves to reveal the scars on my arms. These were all inflicted by my brother, John Foster, since we were young. I have to apply for all expenditures in the Foster family, and I can only borrow jewelry and clothing for use. As for my biological father, he treated me as a tool to pave the way for his son. There was an incident where John Foster almost did something terrible to me, and my father, fully aware of it, did nothing to stop it. Later, after he passed away and the Foster family fell apart, I helped John Foster pay off his debts. When he got into trouble, I used my connections to help him get bailed out and became his caretaker. I looked at the woman in front of me, her face covered in scars, and I laughed bitterly. Who knows? If given the chance, I would just want to be an ordinary person. Emily Reed stared at me for a long time and suddenly broke down, screaming, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Anna Foster, don't lie to me. You must be living a very happy life, right? I just can't stand your happiness. I want everything you have, including James Grant. As long as a woman finds the right good man, her later life is guaranteed. She cried out and gradually began to sob, collapsing into her chair. My phone rang. It was a call from John Foster. I showed her the caller ID and said, Do you want this kind of good fortune? She was still sobbing when I answered the phone. It was John Foster's sister, Anna Foster, right? She told me that John Foster was in trouble and asked me to hurry and help him out. I could hear John Foster's urgent cries in the background, Sister, help me. I really know I was wrong. I only have you left. I calmly asked him what he had done. The stranger coldly replied that he had drugged a girl at the bar and had offended the daughter of someone from the city hall. Your good little brother doesn't want to report it to the police and prefers to settle it privately. Well then, do you want to injure your hand first or your leg? John Foster shouted loudly, No. I will lose money. My sister is wealthy, she's connected to James Grant. Let her come and bail me out. As I listened to the noise around me, my mind drifted back to that kidnapping. Back then, John Foster didn't think much of me. He said my life was worth $30 million and that it could help him pay off his debts. Now, it's my turn. I said a couple of things into the phone. First, I have no relationship with James Grant. Second, John Foster is no longer my brother, and his affairs are none of my concern. Do whatever you want with him. After finishing my words, I hung up and ignored John Foster's pleas. 3 days after I left the detention center, I heard that Emily Reed had committed suicide inside. However, before she left, she revealed a piece of news that left James Grant devastated. The child Charlie, whom he had devoted himself to saving, was not his biological son. On the day he learned this, James Grant cut off Charlie's medical support and even sent someone to deal with Emily Reed's body in a fit of rage. Later, he tracked me down to where I was staying, looking like a drenched stray dog. After reviewing the hospital surveillance, I discovered that it was Charlie who had stabbed you in the stomach, and to my surprise, that child had actually escaped. Don't worry, I will definitely find him and make sure he personally apologizes to you. At that moment, I wore a cold expression as I busily packed my belongings for the move. James Grant followed closely behind me, constantly pleading for me not to leave. Anna, please don't go. I can give you anything, he insisted. Whether it's money, status, or shares in Grant Group, I can offer you all of it. But I was just trying to pack up a bunch of clutter that I didn't want. Hearing his words, I could sense that he instantly lost hope. James Grant, do you know? You really have a knack for causing trouble for others. I impatiently played back the call recording for him to hear. My son James Grant definitely needs to find a suitable girl, not someone like you who isn't very reliable. I suggest you keep your distance from him. James's mother acted very high and mighty. Sister, let's clarify the situation. It's your son who has been bothering me this whole time. I haven't reported this to the police yet, and I've already been very considerate to you. What's wrong? Is it just because you have a bit of money that you think you're so important? I'm saying this outright. This is my attitude. James Grant didn't shy away. Instead, he moved closer to me and said, What does my marriage have to do with my mom? I'll find a way to keep her from bothering you in the future. By the way, didn't you say you wanted to go on a honeymoon? I'll call and make arrangements right now. He seemed a bit dazed, and with a sigh, I picked up my phone and dialed for the police. Hello, police. There's a stranger who has broken into my home and is persistently bothering me. Please come and handle the situation. He seemed surprised that I actually called the police and stood frozen there. That time, the police arrived and took James Grant away. After that, he strangely stayed quiet for a while. Until one day, the news reported that a kid named Charlie reappeared on the rooftop of Grant Group. Charlie is the son of Emily Reed and an unknown lover. At that time, he was on the brink of death due to a lack of medical support. Sitting on the rooftop, he was as thin as a sheet of paper, softly saying, I want Dad, I want Dad. The dad he referred to was, of course, James Grant. The fact that the sole heir of Grant Group had an illegitimate child was thus made public. People who are unaware of the truth feel sorry for the child and harshly criticize James Grant, deeming him utterly irresponsible, even neglecting the child's well-being. However, while watching the live broadcast on television, I couldn't help but think that children can sometimes be smarter than many adults. This little boy has even resorted to self-harm to frame me. Now, he is trying to drag James Grant down with him, burdened by his own pain. In front of everyone, this child leaps off the roof of an 88-story building. The stock price of Grant Group nearly halved due to this turmoil. No one wanted to marry into the Grant's mess. I originally thought all of this had nothing to do with me. At that time, I had found a job and a place to live in another city, ready to start a new life. On the morning I was heading to the airport, as I was crossing the street with my suitcase, a black car suddenly raced toward me. It was clearly a green light, yet the car showed no signs of stopping at all. Just then, a familiar figure suddenly appeared and blocked my way. I fell to the other side of the road, with some scrapes on my hands and legs. However, the man in the middle of the road was struck by the sedan and was bleeding profusely. It was James Grant. He seemed to want to crawl towards me with all his might, but he had already exhausted his strength. The driver was so frightened that he almost jumped out of the car and fell beside James Grant, unable to straighten up. "James, how could it be you?" James Grant simply stared at me, a trace of a sad smile on his face. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Little Bao, this is a car sent by my mom. She hates you for ruining my future." I regained my composure from the shock and shakily dialed 120, but ultimately it was too late. It is said that on the day of James Grant's funeral, his mother kowtowed before her son's coffin and then became mentally unstable. Looking at the face on the obituary, I recalled the moment he pushed me away and his final words to me. He asked me, "Anna Foster, if there is an afterlife, can we love each other again?" I shook my head. "James Grant, if there's an afterlife, I hope we won't meet again."